Across the galaxy, there exists a universal truth that every species learns before they reach the stars. Warfare has rules, boundaries, limits that separate civilization from chaos. For 3,000 years, I commanded fleets that conquered worlds. I witnessed the fury of the crystalline Vorthak as they shattered moons with sonic screams. I watched the hive mind Zephyrians sacrifice entire colonies without hesitation. I even survived the nightmare of facing the machine race known as the Reapers, who calculated victory through pure mathematical brutality. I thought I had seen every form of warfare the universe could offer. I was wrong. The day humanity broke its chains, I learned that everything I knew about battle was merely the gentle prelude to a symphony of destruction I never imagined possible. What I witnessed didn't just change the course of the war, it changed what it means to fight, to survive, and to be truly, terrifyingly alive in the face of extinction. This is the story of how a species I dismissed as weak prey animals became the apex predators of the galaxy. This is the story of how humanity taught the universe a new definition of war, and this is the story of how I learned to fear again. The first time Admiral Cathvar Zolman of the Hegemony First Fleet saw humans fight, he laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. The four-armed Drakmari commander stood 3 meters tall, his obsidian carapace gleaming under the bridge lights of his flagship, Inevitable Conquest. His secondary arms drummed against his command throne as tactical displays showed the human defensive fleet scrambling to protect their colony world of New Geneva. "Observe their formations," Zolman growled to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Vexai. "No coordination between ship classes. Their heavy cruisers are positioned too far forward, leaving gaps in their defensive grid. Their fighters scatter like frightened insects rather than maintaining proper squadron cohesion." The tactical display painted a clear picture. 47 human vessels faced his battle group of 23 ships. On paper, the humans held numerical superiority. In reality, they were already dead. The Drakmari had been perfecting fleet warfare for over 2 millennia. Every vessel had its designated role, every maneuver calculated for maximum efficiency, every strategy refined through countless victories. "Shall we commence the standard engagement protocol, Admiral?" Vexai asked, his mandibles clicking in anticipation. "Standard protocol," Zolman confirmed. "Begin with long-range bombardment to test their shield arrays. Force them to cluster their formation. Once they commit to a defensive posture, we execute Maneuver 7. Split our forces, force them to divide their attention, then converge on their command vessel." It was textbook warfare, the kind of tactical perfection that had brought 17 species under hegemony control. Clean, efficient, predictable. The first exchange of fire confirmed Zolman's assessment. Human plasma batteries fired in ragged volleys, their targeting solutions crude compared to Drakmari precision. Their shields flared and buckled under concentrated fire from just 3 of his destroyers. Within minutes, 2 human frigates were venting atmosphere, their hulls cracked like broken shells. "Their shield harmonics are completely unsynced," Vexai reported. "They cannot maintain overlapping defensive matrices. And Admiral, their weapons are firing independently. No coordination protocols whatsoever." Zolman's laugh rumbled through the bridge again. "Primitives. Begin Maneuver 7. But something was wrong. As his forces split into 2 attack formations, the human fleet didn't react as predicted. Instead of consolidating their defense around their command carrier, they scattered further. Ships broke formation entirely, some accelerating towards his flanks while others seemed to retreat toward the planet's upper atmosphere. "Tactical error?" Vexai suggested. "Perhaps their command structure has collapsed. Perhaps," Zolman mused, but unease crept along his spine. In his 3 centuries of warfare, he had learned to trust that feeling. Continue the advance, but maintain sensor sweeps on all vectors. That was when the first human ship exploded. Not from Drakmari fire, but from some internal detonation that sent debris streaking across space. The signature was unmistakable, a fusion reactor overload. Zolman's mandibles clicked in confusion. Reactor failures were catastrophic accidents, not tactical decisions. Then a second human ship exploded. Then a third. "Admiral?" Vexai's voice carried a tremor of uncertainty. The humans appeared to be destroying their own vessels. The tactical display shifted as more human ships erupted in brilliant flashes. But these weren't random self-destructions. The explosions were creating debris fields at specific coordinates, forming barriers that forced Zolman's advancing formations into narrower approach vectors. "They're channeling us," he realized with growing alarm. "Those aren't ship failures. They're using their own vessels as obstacles. What kind of species sacrificed their own ships as tactical elements?" The concept violated every principle of civilized warfare. Vessels were resources to be preserved, crews were assets to be protected. You didn't simply waste them like ammunition. The human command carrier, a massive vessel that should have been the primary target, suddenly accelerated directly toward his main battle group. Its shields were down, weapons offline, but it was moving at ramming speed. All batteries, target that carrier, Zolman commanded. Full spread. The inevitable conquest and two heavy cruisers poured fire into the approaching human vessel, its hull breached in dozens of places, atmosphere streaming behind it like a comet's tail. But it kept coming. Sir, we're detecting massive energy buildups throughout their remaining fleet, the sensor operator called out. They're overloading everything: engines, reactors, weapon capacitors. Understanding struck Zolman like a physical blow. The humans weren't trying to win this battle through superior tactics or firepower. They were turning their entire fleet into weapons. Every ship was becoming a guided missile, a fusion bomb, a kinetic projectile aimed at maximum devastation. The command carrier struck his heavy cruiser Bloody Claw at a significant fraction of light speed. The explosion was visible from 3-star systems away. The cruiser simply ceased to exist, vaporized in an instant of nuclear fury that sent shockwaves rippling through both fleets. But the humans weren't finished. The scattered ships that had seemed to retreat were now accelerating back toward his forces from multiple vectors. Some had their hulls breached, trailing debris and bodies, but their pilots maintained course. Others spun end over end, clearly damaged but still closing distance with engines at full burn. Admiral, what are your orders? Vexai's voice was strained. Zolman stared at the tactical display in horror and fascination. Half the human fleet was gone, but the survivors were creating chaos his tactical computers couldn't process. This wasn't warfare, it was organized, suicide directed toward maximum carnage. Emergency withdrawal, he ordered. All ships fall back to jump distance. But withdrawal required time to charge the hyperdrive motivators. Time the humans weren't willing to give them. A damaged human destroyer, its front section completely destroyed and trailing a cloud of frozen atmosphere, somehow managed to ram his frigate Swift Talon. The impact sent both ships tumbling toward the planet's gravity well. Another human vessel so badly damaged it was essentially a flying debris field held together by emergency force fields, managed to detonate its remaining antimatter pods directly against the shields of his battlecruiser Endless Victory. The shields held, but the energy feedback overloaded 3 primary weapon systems. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface, the communications officer reported. Put it through. The image that appeared on the main screen showed a human female in what appeared to be a military uniform. Behind her, Zolman could see explosions lighting the sky as debris from the space battle rained down like meteor showers. She was bleeding from a head wound, her dark skin marked with ashen burns, but her expression was utterly calm. This is General Sarah Chen of the New Geneva Colonial Defense Force, she said in accented standard. I'm transmitting to inform you that our orbital defense platforms are armed with fusion warheads. We're prepared to detonate them simultaneously if any of your forces attempt planetary bombardment. Zolman's blood chilled. Orbital defense platforms powered their entire global infrastructure. Detonating them would devastate the planet's surface, killing millions of their own people. You're bluffing, he said. No species commits planetary suicide. General Chen's smile was terrifying in its complete lack of warmth. Admiral, in the past hour, we've sacrificed 41 ships and over 12,000 personnel to destroy 4 of your vessels and damage 3 others. We've proven we're willing to die to hurt you. Do you really think we'll hesitate to take our planet with us? The communication cut. Zolman stared at the blank screen, his mind struggling to process what he had witnessed. In 3 centuries of warfare, he had faced fanatics, zealots, and desperate defenders. But he had never encountered anything like this. The humans fought with a combination of tactical flexibility and absolute ruthlessness that defied every military doctrine he knew. They didn't fight to win. They fought to make victory as costly as possible. Admiral, jump coordinates are locked, Vexai reported. Execute jump, now. As the stars stretched into lines and his fleet escaped into hyperspace, Admiral Kethvar Zolman realized that everything he thought he knew about warfare had just become obsolete. The humans hadn't simply defended their world, they had demonstrated that the rules of civilized conflict meant nothing to them. But what truly disturbed him wasn't their willingness to die. It was the calculating intelligence behind their sacrifice. Every seemingly suicidal move had served a tactical purpose. Every desperate ramming attack had been precisely aimed for maximum damage. They had turned their own destruction into an art form. He had been fighting this war for 3 years, slowly conquering human colonies with methodical precision. Each victory had been easier than the last, reinforcing his belief that humanity was just another primitive species destined for subjugation. Their technology was inferior, their ships were poorly designed, and their tactics were basic compared to hegemony doctrine. Now he understood his mistake. The humans he had been fighting weren't the real threat. They had been holding back, constrained by their own ideas about civilized warfare. But something was changing. General Chen's transmission had carried an undertone he recognized from species pushed to the brink of extinction, the sound of chains breaking. In his private quarters aboard the inevitable Conquest, Admiral Zolman reviewed tactical recordings from the battle. Frame by frame, he analyzed each human ship's final moments. The precision of their timing, the coordination hidden beneath apparent chaos, the way they had anticipated his standard maneuvers and prepared counters that turned his own tactics against him. These weren't the actions of desperate primitives. This was sophisticated warfare disguised as madness. And if the humans were capable of this level of tactical deception, what else were they hiding? He opened a quantum communication link to Hegemony Command, his report already forming in his mind. The human colonies weren't just another conquest anymore. They had become something far more dangerous, an enemy that refused to fight by the rules. But as Zolman began his transmission, he couldn't shake the feeling that the battle at New Geneva had been more than a desperate defensive action. It felt like a message, a warning broadcast across the galaxy in the language of fire and twisted metal. The humans were no longer playing by anyone else's rules, and that terrified him more than any weapon in the galaxy. 6 months after New Geneva, Admiral Zolman stood in the strategic center of Hegemony Command, watching as the galactic situation map displayed a pattern that made his stomach clench with dread. Red markers indicated human territories, colonies that had fallen silent, worlds where hegemony fleets had encountered impossible resistance, and systems where entire task forces had simply disappeared. The pattern wasn't random. It was spreading like an infection, following hyperlane routes and trade corridors with methodical precision. "Report," Fleet Commander Torax demanded. The ancient Vorthax crystalline form pulsed with agitation, creating harmonic frequencies that made the room's metal surfaces ring softly. "Human activity has escalated beyond all projections," Zolman replied, manipulating the holographic display. 3 weeks ago, Admiral Vexthal's 4th Fleet moved to pacify the Kepler 442 system, standard bombardment protocol, orbital strikes on military installations, followed by ground occupation. And the 4th Fleet is gone. All 17 vessels. Sensor records from the engagement lasted exactly 14 minutes before transmission ceased. The assembled fleet commanders shifted uneasily. Torax's harmonic song took on a sharper, more discordant tone. 14 minutes? Against a single colony world? The final transmission showed human vessels emerging from hyperspace, but not from the expected vectors. They appeared to jump directly into the system's corona, using the star's energy output to mask their approach signatures. When they engaged, they weren't using standard ship designs anymore. Zolman enhanced the tactical display, showing the last clear images from the 4th Fleet sensors. The human ships looked wrong, asymmetrical, brutal, more like mechanical predators than proper spacecraft. Weapon emplacements covered every available surface, and their hulls bristled with devices that served no recognizable purpose. "They've abandoned their previous ship classes entirely," he continued. "These new designs prioritize firepower and survivability over crew comfort or long-term maintenance. They're building ships designed for one purpose, killing enemy vessels as efficiently as possible." "And the crews?" asked Admiral Sektar, the cybernetic nexus representative. "Surely they cannot maintain effectiveness with such primitive conditions." Zolman's mandibles clicked grimly. "That's the problem. We don't think they're planning for long-term deployments anymore. Intelligence suggests they're training entire generations for single missions. Crews who expect to die in battle, commanders who view ship survival as secondary to enemy destruction. The strategic implications were staggering. Every military doctrine in the galaxy assumed that ships and crews were valuable resources to be preserved, but if the humans had eliminated that assumption, they could employ tactics that no sane species would consider. "There's more," Zolman continued. "The Meridian incident. Torax's harmonic song stopped abruptly, creating an eerie silence in the command center. The Meridian system had been a major hegemony logistics hub, defended by 2 full battle groups and a fixed orbital defense network. It had been considered impregnable. Admiral Kolvash reported successful defense, Sektar stated. The human attack was repelled with minimal losses. The human attack was a feint, Zolman corrected. While we celebrated our victory, human infiltration teams were already in place throughout our supply network. They had spent months identifying every automated cargo vessel, every supply depot, every maintenance facility in the region. He manipulated the display again, showing a web of red lines connecting dozens of systems. They didn't try to capture our resources. They poisoned them. Nanoscale contaminants in our ammunition supplies that cause spontaneous detonations. Viruses in our food production systems that make rations toxic to most hegemony species. Computer viruses that turn our own automated defenses against us. Impossible, Thorax resonated. Our security protocols were designed to prevent direct assault, not this kind of systematic contamination. They turned our own logistics network into a weapon against us. 7 systems are now effectively quarantined because we can't trust our own supplies. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of environmental systems. Each commander was processing the implications. The humans weren't just fighting differently, they were fighting a completely different kind of war. Sir, the tactical aide interrupted. Priority transmission from the Outer Rim. Admiral Thaxmal requests immediate assistance. Put it through. The hologram that appeared showed a battered Catherian commander, his usual golden skin now pale with exhaustion and stress. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship was clearly damaged, with repair crews working frantically at damaged stations. Fleet Command, this is Admiral Thaxmal of the 7th Expeditionary Force. We need immediate reinforcement at the Proxima Centauri system. Report your status, Admiral, Thorax commanded. We engaged human forces 6 hours ago. Intelligence indicated a minor colonial defense fleet, 12 vessels maximum. We arrived with a full battle group, 32 ships. Thaxmal paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a tremor that Zolman had never heard from the veteran commander. The humans were waiting for us. Not with ships, but with something else they had, modified the asteroids in the system's belt, turned them into kinetic weapons using mass drivers. When we entered the system, they launched thousands of rock fragments at near-light speeds. The hologram flickered as another explosion rocked Thexmal's ship. That's not the worst part, the Admiral continued. They've weaponized the local wildlife. Explain, Sectar demanded. Proxima Centauri has a biologically active third planet. The humans have somehow trained the local organisms. Microscopic entities that can survive in space for short periods. When our boarding parties attempted to secure the orbital stations, they encountered swarms of these creatures. They're like nothing in our databases. They appear to be engineered specifically to target our life support systems. Another tremor ran through Thexmal's ship. Admiral, we're not fighting a military force anymore. This is biological warfare combined with environmental manipulation on a system-wide scale. They've turned an entire solar system into a weapon. The transmission cut to static. Zolman felt something cold settle in his chest. This wasn't the desperate defense of New Geneva anymore. The humans were demonstrating abilities that suggested they had been preparing for this war far longer than anyone had realized. How is this possible? Thorax asked, his harmonic song now barely audible. 6 months ago they were using standard defensive tactics. Now they're employing strategies our combined intelligence services can't even classify. Because they've stopped pretending to be civilized, Zolman said quietly. Every engagement we've documented shows the same pattern. They're not just adapting their tactics. They're abandoning every military convention that limits effectiveness in favor of maximum lethality. He brought up another display showing captured intelligence from human communications. Our xenolinguistics teams have been monitoring their military transmissions. They've stopped using traditional command structures. Instead of admirals and generals, they have something called architects of extinction. Rather than defensive strategies, they discuss consequence multiplication. They're not planning battles, they're designing nightmares. The display showed intercepted human technical specifications, ship designs that incorporated biological components, weapon systems that grew stronger by consuming enemy vessels, armor that regenerated by metabolizing space debris. They're not building a military, Zolman continued. They're evolving one. Every engagement teaches them something new about us, and they adapt faster than we can counter. Sir! The communications officer's voice was urgent. Multiple emergency signals across the Outer Rim. Reports of simultaneous attacks on 17 systems. The strategic display updated in real time, showing red warning indicators blooming across a vast section of the galaxy. Not random attacks. A coordinated offensive that suggested the humans had been observing hegemony fleet movements and timing their strikes for maximum impact. They're not responding to our attacks anymore, Zolman realized with growing horror. This is them taking the initiative. But as reports flooded in from the besieged systems, a pattern emerged that was even more disturbing than coordinated attacks. The human forces weren't trying to hold territory or capture resources. They were systematically destroying everything that made those systems valuable. Orbital infrastructure, mining operations, agricultural facilities, research stations. They're making the galaxy uninhabitable, Thorax whispered, his harmonic song now completely silent. On the strategic display, each attack system was marked with a different symbol as reports clarified the nature of the assaults. Biological contamination at Rigel. Gravitational weapons that destabilized planetary orbits at Wolf 359. At the Tau Ceti system, the humans had somehow triggered a cascade reaction in the star itself, making the entire system uninhabitable for the next 1,000 years. They're not trying to conquer us, Zolman said, understanding finally dawning. They're trying to make conquest meaningless. If they can't have these worlds, they're ensuring no one can. The magnitude of what he was witnessing struck him like a physical blow. This wasn't warfare as any species understood it. This was systematic extinction, not just of enemies, but of the very concept of victory through conquest. His tactical computer chimed with an incoming transmission from deep space. The signal was broadcasting on all frequencies, completely unencrypted, as if the sender wanted everyone in the galaxy to receive it. The face that appeared was human, a woman with short grey hair and eyes that seemed to hold the weight of dead worlds. Behind her, the bridge of her ship was unlike anything in Zolman's experience. Organic curves blended with crystalline structures, and in the background he could see what appeared to be living beings integrated directly into the ship's systems. "I am Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Human Expeditionary Force," she said, her voice carrying across the galaxy with terrifying calm. "This message is for all hegemony forces and their allies." She paused, and Zolman noticed that her left arm had been replaced with some kind of biomechanical prosthetic that pulsed with its own internal light. "You came to our worlds believing you understood what humanity was capable of. You saw our peaceful colonies, our trade vessels, our diplomatic protocols, and you assumed we were weak. You were wrong." The transmission shifted to show external views of her fleet, ships that defied classification, vessels that seemed to blur the line between technology and biology, weapons platforms that looked more like living creatures than manufactured devices. "We are not the humans you first encountered. Those people, the farmers, the merchants, the diplomats, they were what we chose to be when we believed in coexistence. But you have taught us that the galaxy respects only strength, only the willingness to destroy rather than create." Admiral Vasquez's expression never changed, but something in her eyes grew colder. "You wanted to see what humanity looks like when we stop pretending to be civilized. Now you know. This is us unchained. This is us embracing what we truly are when you take away everything we care about." The transmission ended. In the command center of Hegemony Command, absolute silence stretched for long moments. Finally, Torax spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "What are your recommendations, Admiral Zolman?" Zolman looked at the strategic display, at the spreading red markers that represented not just military defeats, but the systematic dismantling of everything the hegemony had built over millennia. He thought about the humans he had faced at New Geneva, desperate defenders using suicide tactics. Then he thought about Admiral Vasquez and her impossible ships, about attacks that turned entire star systems into weapons. "I recommend," he said slowly, "that we stop thinking of this as a war we can win, and start figuring out how to survive what we've created." 1 year after New Geneva, Admiral Kethvar Zolman found himself standing in the ruins of what had once been the galaxy's greatest military installation. The Nexus Primarius had been the hegemony's central command fortress, a massive space station built into a hollowed-out moon and protected by gravitational weapons that could crush entire fleets. Now it was a tomb drifting in space, its hull breached in precisely calculated locations that had caused catastrophic decompression while leaving the main structural supports intact. The humans hadn't destroyed it. They had dissected it. "The final count?" Zolman asked the Kytherian salvage specialist beside him. 17,412 dead, Engineer Zexnal replied, his usually golden skin now pale with exhaustion and horror. Not a single survivor in the central command sections. "But Admiral, that's not the strangest part." Zolman waited, though he dreaded the answer. Every encounter with human tactics over the past year had revealed new depths of strategic thinking that defied conventional understanding. "They didn't kill everyone at once," Zexnal continued. "The attack patterns suggest they moved through the station systematically, section by section. They had time to examine our computer systems, our tactical databases, our strategic planning archives. They downloaded everything." "How long?" "Based on the evidence, they controlled the station for at least 6 hours before the final phase. They could have destroyed it immediately, but instead they took time to study us. Every command protocol, every fleet disposition, every strategic plan we had for the next 50 years. Zolman closed his eyes, feeling the weight of complete military failure settling over him like a shroud. The humans hadn't just won another battle, they had stolen the hegemony's institutional knowledge of warfare itself. "Sir," Zexnal continued quietly. There's something else. In the central command chamber, they left something behind. They made their way through the station's twisted corridors, past bulkheads that had been opened with surgical precision and weapon emplacements that had been disabled without being destroyed. The humans had moved through this fortress like it was their own territory, demonstrating an understanding of hegemony defensive systems that suggested they had been studying their enemies for far longer than anyone had imagined. The central command chamber had once been a cathedral of military power, filled with holographic displays showing the entire galaxy and the positions of every hegemony fleet. Now it was silent except for the soft whisper of escaping atmosphere through hull breaches that had been carefully positioned to avoid damaging the main computer core. In the center of the chamber, where Fleet Commander Torax had once stood directing the conquest of dozens of worlds, someone had placed a simple metal chair. On the chair sat a human in what appeared to be a military uniform, though the design was unlike anything in Zolman's databases. The figure was alive but motionless, connected to the station's computer systems through cables that seemed to grow directly from the chair into the human skull. On the main holographic display, a message waited in perfect hegemony standard. "Admiral Zolman, we have been waiting for you." The human's eyes opened, revealing irises that glowed with the same bioluminescent patterns Zolman had seen in the organic components of their warships. When the figure spoke, the voice came from the station's communication systems rather than from the person's lips. "I am Commander David Park of the Human Integration Corps," the voice said, the words accompanied by harmonics that suggested the speaker was somehow connected to multiple audio systems throughout the station. "Though I is no longer an accurate term. I am part of something larger now." Zolman approached cautiously, his weapon drawn but knowing it was probably useless. "What are you?" "I am what humanity becomes when we stop pretending individual survival matters more than species effectiveness," the commander replied. "I volunteered for integration 6 months ago, when it became clear that fighting you required capabilities beyond normal human limitations." The holographic displays around the chamber flickered to life, showing real-time images from across the galaxy. Human fleets engaged hegemony forces in dozens of systems, but these weren't the desperate defense actions Zolman had witnessed a year ago. These were coordinated strikes of impossible precision, executed by forces that seemed to anticipate every tactical counter before it was implemented. "You studied us," Commander Park continued. "You learned our weaknesses, our technological limitations, our tactical doctrines. You believed this would give you advantage." The displays shifted to show hegemony fleet movements from the past 6 months, movements that had been predicted and countered by human forces with supernatural accuracy. But you failed to understand the fundamental difference between your species and ours. You adapt through institutional learning. Your military improves by adding knowledge to databases and training protocols. We adapt by becoming something new. Zolman stared at the figure in the chair, beginning to understand the true scope of what he was witnessing. "You're not individuals anymore. Individual consciousness is a luxury for species that can afford inefficiency," Commander Park replied. "We discovered that 10,000 minds working in perfect coordination are infinitely more effective than 10,000 individuals pursuing separate survival goals." The holographic displays now showed the internal structure of human ships, revealing organic neural networks that connected every crew member into a collective consciousness. Ships weren't commanded by individual captains, they were operated by distributed intelligences that could process tactical information and implement responses faster than any conventional crew. "This is an abomination," Zexnal whispered behind Zolman. "This is evolution," Commander Park corrected. "You forced us to choose between extinction and transformation. We chose transformation." The display shifted again, showing star charts marked with the current positions of every major hegemony fleet. The accuracy was impossible. Some of these positions were classified beyond the highest security levels. "We know where every ship is, Admiral Zolman. We know their destinations, their objectives, their tactical capabilities. We know because we have been watching you for 3 years, learning everything about how you think, how you fight, how you plan." Understanding struck Zolman like a physical blow. "The early battles, you were losing deliberately. We were learning. Every engagement taught us more about your capabilities, your limitations, your psychological patterns. We discovered that your greatest strength, coordination through hierarchical command structures, is also your greatest weakness. Disrupt the command structure, and your forces become individually capable but collectively ineffective." The display showed tactical analyses of every major battle in the war, with detailed breakdowns of hegemony response patterns, decision trees, and tactical preferences. The humans had been studying their enemies with scientific precision, gathering data for a transformation that would make victory inevitable. The question now, Commander Park continued, is what happens next? We have achieved tactical superiority. We can destroy your fleets, devastate your colonies, and reduce your civilization to scattered refugees hiding in the galactic periphery. Zolman felt ice forming in his veins, but you're not going to. Extinction is wasteful. You represent technologies, perspectives, and capabilities that could be useful if properly integrated into our new paradigm. The holographic displays now showed something that made Zolman's mandibles click in horror. Human ships approaching dozens of hegemony worlds, but these weren't attack formations. They were landing fleets, carrying what appeared to be medical and engineering equipment. Integration, he whispered. Voluntary integration, Commander Park corrected. We have learned that forced conversion produces inferior results, but we are prepared to offer every species in the hegemony the same choice we faced: evolve beyond individual limitations or face extinction through irrelevance. Images flowed across the displays showing human integration centers being established on captured worlds. Not concentration camps or processing facilities, but something that looked almost like medical facilities combined with research installations. Those who choose integration will help us perfect the techniques. Those who refuse will be relocated to reservation worlds where they can maintain their traditional existence while we continue the work of galactic optimization. And if we refuse entirely, Zolman asked, though he already knew the answer. Then you will discover what warfare looks like when conducted by a species that has abandoned individual self-preservation in favor of collective effectiveness, Commander Park replied. We have spent 1 year learning to fight as integrated consciousness networks. We are prepared to spend the next century perfecting the art of systematic extinction if necessary. The displays showed human forces throughout the galaxy, not just ships, but entire populations that had undergone the integration process. Billions of minds working in perfect coordination, sharing knowledge instantaneously, adapting to threats faster than any individual consciousness could comprehend. You wanted to see humanity unchained, Commander Park said. These are our chains broken. The limitations of individual thought, individual survival instincts, individual moral constraints that prevented us from achieving maximum effectiveness. Zolman looked around the ruined command center, at the evidence of tactical precision that had allowed a handful of integrated humans to destroy the galaxy's most fortified installation without losing a single life. He thought about his own species, the proud Drakmari warrior culture that valued individual heroism and personal honor above collective efficiency. How long do we have to decide? He asked. Integration centers will be operational within 6 months, Commander Park replied. We estimate it will take approximately 10 years to process the volunteer populations from all hegemony species. Those who refuse will have an additional 5 years to establish sustainable colonies in designated reservation zones. And after that? After that? The galaxy will be optimized for maximum efficiency and minimum conflict. Individual species preservation will be maintained in controlled environments, while integrated populations focus on expansion beyond this galaxy. The implications were staggering. Not just conquest, but complete transformation of galactic civilization itself. The humans weren't just winning the war, they were redefining what post-war existence would look like. I have one final message for you, Admiral, Commander Park said. For the hegemony commanders who will receive your report, for the species leaders who will debate our offer, for anyone who believes this outcome could have been avoided. The displays went dark except for a single image, the human colony of New Geneva, as it had appeared before the war began. Green fields, peaceful cities, children playing in parks while their parents worked in research facilities and agricultural centers. This is what you destroyed, Commander Park said, his integrated voice carrying harmonics of loss that seemed to echo from every speaker in the station. These people wanted nothing more than to build farms and raise families and contribute to galactic civilization through peaceful cooperation. The image shifted to show New Geneva as it appeared now, a memorial world where the surviving human population maintained monuments to the billions who had died in the first year of the war. Not tombs or graves, but living installations that served as both remembrance and research facilities. You taught us that peace was weakness. You showed us that cooperation was vulnerability. You demonstrated that in this galaxy, only the utterly ruthless can protect what they value. Commander Park's glowing eyes focused directly on Zolman with disturbing intensity. We learned your lesson perfectly. Now you will live with the consequences of being such effective teachers. The transmission ended, leaving Zolman alone with Zexnau in the silent command center. Outside the viewports, human ships waited patiently, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that suggested they were somehow alive. As they made their way back to the shuttle, Zexnal finally spoke. "What do we tell the Council?" Zolman looked back at the ruined station, at the evidence of tactical brilliance that had turned the galaxy's greatest fortress into a classroom for studying enemy psychology. He thought about integrated human consciousness networks that could coordinate billions of minds toward common goals. He thought about the choice facing every species in the galaxy: transform or be transformed. "We tell them the truth," he said finally. "We believed we were fighting humans. Instead, we were creating something entirely new. Something that makes warfare itself obsolete by removing every limitation that makes conflict inefficient." "And our recommendation?" Zolman activated his shuttle's communication system, preparing to send what might be the last traditional military report in galactic history. On the screen before him, he began composing words that would fundamentally change how every species in the galaxy understood their future. "We recommend immediate cessation of all hostile activities," he said. "Not surrender, evolution. The humans have shown us what we can become if we're willing to abandon the illusion of individual supremacy." As his shuttle cleared the ruins of the Nexus Primarius, Zolman took one last look at the human fleet waiting in perfect formation. Ships that pulsed with shared consciousness, crews that fought as one, weapons that fired with precision no individual mind could achieve. He had believed he knew battle. Now he understood that battle itself was just another chain that intelligent species could choose to break. The question was whether the rest of the galaxy would be wise enough to learn from humanity's example before they had to learn from humanity's teachers. "I believed I knew battle until humanity broke its chains." HFY sci-fi story.